So we're having,
Technical issues.
we've had a lot of them. So anyway, the the problem with popcorn for somebody who's a repair person is quite often the paint was added to it most of the time, so that you didn't have to come back and paint the ceiling. All you had to do was paint the walls. Uh, but you don't know how much paint they put in, or what ratio of paint to texture to how much water was put in that mix, and so it was just really hard to match. There were some guys that claim, with lots of confidence that they could, but generally you kind of tried to blend it in. Um, if somebody had smoked, or if they had a fireplace, or if it was close to the kitchen, quite often it would be a different color when you patched it. It'd be brighter white, uh, and you could kind of work at it and probably get close to the thickness or the pattern of that popcorn. But it was not an easy thing, and it had to be forgiving customer that was not looking for perfection. And if it was they were looking for perfection on that kind of thing, you just said, well, it's by the hour. And sometimes you could get really close. It took a lot of work to get there. Uh, Most of the time, uh, you had to spray in a wide area and just kind of blend. And you could still do that, but you taught it, instead of just spraying in one area, you kind of blend it out. You concentrate on the area that doesn't have any, and then you blend it out. So how would you do that and not get onto the furniture? You end up having to cover everything because you're spraying texture on the ceiling. And a lot of times, what I would do is staple, 3 or 4 feet all the way around that patched area, past it, and then just spray heavy in the area that uh, had missing, usually because it got wet or something, or there was I remember one time it was uh, a spoon into baby food, like my mother had happened to her after microwaving it. It went boom, and there's baby food all over, stained the ceiling. So we had to scrape it off and then try to respray it. I actually have a hand pump for that, but it was not a great. I still have the plastic pump, and you put in you could buy these 1 gallon uh, buckets of texture, but they quit making them, so I just end up cutting the top of the bucket out and put it in there like a hopper, and then I could hand spray it, which is quite the challenge because when you're holding up, you're trying to not have it fall out of the bucket or the 1 gallon jug. Uh, but anyway, so what you did was you hit that area that was not, didn't have any texture, and you kind of blended it out to that plastic that was stapled to the rest of it. And then whenever you got done, of course, you had plastic on the floor and plastic on the furniture. You covered everything because that hopper sprays with air pressure, so it's blowing the plastic around. Sometimes you could tape it to the plastic on the floor, and then you had to be careful when you were walking out of that area because you're stepping in it, and you could walk across some pretty fancy carpet and make a mess. So you end up making a track for yourself to get out the door and down the sidewalk and all those kind of elaborate things. Um, so what you do is do way more preparation than at actual work. When they spray it in a new home, the first thing they do is they spray the ceiling. And before they even go in there, they go out in, and usually the same guys, well, almost always the same guys who spray the ceiling, spray the walls. So they spend more time covering all the windows and doors than they ever will with spraying the texture. They're really good at it, but they take a lot of time to tape off mask, put paper on the windows, and the doors and anything else they want to protect, like the opening for the washer and dryer, that area. Uh, Cover up the heat, central heat and air. You got to cover that up. Cabinets, if the cabinets are in there already, which usually they're not, uh, they get in there before the cabinets usually. Uh, so you got to cover all those things. Then you spray that popcorn on the ceiling if they're doing. A lot of people don't want it anymore because of the now it's kind of looked down on, and has a tendency after 10 or 15 years to kind of drop onto your carpet all the time, little bitty balls dropping from the ceiling. Uh, and then whenever you get ready to paint that popcorn, if you do it with a roller, the moisture gets up on that popcorn and rolls off in your roller pad a lot of the time. So you kind of have to spray it, and now you're covering everything because the spray gets everywhere. It's quite the journey to paint that popcorn. A lot of the times it will roll off, and now you got to spray it again. It'll get into your pad, and it's because the moisture uh, takes that. It's water based to begin with, and the moisture pulls it off the ceiling. Doesn't matter how long it's been there. And with that in mind, that's how you take that popcorn off. You cover everything. Notice I'm saying this a lot. You cover everything with plastic so that you can pull it all down and then into the floor and then roll up in the floor. And you got to make sure your feet are not, getting dirty and then stepping on carpet. It's quite a process. But anyway, you take a pump up water sprayer like a bug sprayer or something, and you just spray it all with a light mist. Spray it on there, spray water on there, and then you just take your finishing knife and scrapes off. Just comes off in big chunks. It gets all over you, invariably. So you end up scraping it all off, so you can put whatever texture you're gonna put. A lot of times people say, "Oh no, let me look at it like that, and I'll make up my mind what kind of texture. I just don't want to see that anymore." Or I can paint it myself. That's another one I've heard a lot. So it's not an easy job to scrape off all that popcorn. It's not highly technical, not highly skilled. It's just paying attention to protect all the furniture and the floor and all that stuff. It's a lot of work. So spraying texture on the ceiling's a lot of work. The amount of paint and all that you put in, that's kind of up to you if you're spraying it on. The amount of thickness is again up to your eye, what you think is good. You can hide some sins with texture, but it tends to show if it's got a serious line. It tends to show if you don't know how to blend it in. It's a little bit of a skill putting that up. But they will go in there and spend 4 guys spend an hour taping everything up, and then it'll take they'll go through and spray the popcorn first, and then they'll spray the orange peel or heavy knockdown on the walls, and then they'll peel off all the door and plastic in the windows and everything, pull it off and take it out, and then they'll take scrapers. Actually, I'm skipping a step. Whenever you spray the popcorn, you spray right up to the corners of the ceiling where the walls meet the ceiling, and they take scrapers and they scrape up to the ceiling, and it falls onto the floor. You scrape up the wall to the ceiling all the way around. Then they change the hose to whatever texture they're going to put, orange peel or heavy knockdown, usually on the walls, and they get ready to spray it. They don't pull any of the plastic off yet, so they spray all the walls, and then they pull the plastic down that's covering everything, and then they scrape the floor, and that's all while it's wet. So all it's doing is leaving the residue of texture on the floor when they scrape it. So that's why a lot of times on houses before they're finished, you get out there before the carpet and the flooring's in, and you notice that everything kind of looks like a white film on it. That's because they scraped all that floor up. Uh, and you don't want them to come in and spray while you've got the carpet because they don't they're not going to be used to protecting it. So that's what you do when it comes to popcorn. Um, I've seen some interesting things whenever they paint it with a sprayer that I've literally seen that paint hold the popcorn together so well that it ends up making a bubble in the paint and texture mixed together, so that it holds water like a balloon. Uh, it gives you plenty of warning. You don't notice it. You're not paying attention. So it's a little more difficult to scrape off when it has been sprayed with an airless or something. Um, to scrape off that texture, it's quite a bit more work, but it is still not a highly skilled thing to do. It's more of a, what is the word? It's more of a tedious, being patient, doing the job right kind of thing. So you're protecting everything, and then scraping everything, cleaning everything up very carefully. So, but you don't have to do popcorn only on the ceiling. There's a whole lot of different. You can actually spray the walls and the ceiling with a heavy knockdown the exact same, um, or you can make it heavier on the ceiling generally, and then lighter on the walls. Uh, and you can do that with a hopper, or you can have it. Whenever they use the big reservoir sprayer, you can use that. That's real expensive. You're not going to want to buy that machine. I don't know what it's, $40,000 or something like that. They make smaller versions of it. I use a hopper. I have multiple hoppers because of sometimes I'm a long ways away from the one I bought, um, and I just go ahead and purchase one that costs $80 to $100 to buy one, and you got to have the compressor, and it needs to hold about 80 pounds constantly. So it's got to have a real fast recovery. And that's why that one sprayer that I have is special, because it can keep up with anything. If the hopper's wide open spraying, it can keep up. So it needs a high CFM, sort of like the same kind of CFM or cubic feet per minute as would be used with an impact tool for mechanicing. Just needs a lot. It uses about 80 pounds. You need to keep that pressure at 80, or it'll literally do a different texture. So anyway, when you do a regular orange peel, you don't have to knock it down. Generally you don't on the walls, and you can do the same orange peel on the ceilings. It's when you want to blend the colors a little bit more. So you still, white is going to be white if you put on the white on the ceiling. Then if you want to put a tan on the walls, you're going to see the difference. But if it's not got a heavy texture difference, it won't be as stark of a difference when it comes to the paint. When it comes to the orange peel and the whenever you're getting ready to spray any texture, you're going to want to temporarily spray it into a piece of drywall or something, and make sure you got the right orifice on it, because you'll have choices when you get your hopper, and you can dial it usually and tighten it down, or you can put in different size holes on that hopper itself. And when you get to orange peel, a lot of times you have to shake it, because it's kind of slid into the back of the hopper. Hopper's shaped like so. You have to shake it to get it down in the bottom so that the air pressure can push it out. So you got to be careful that you're not making a different texture when you do that. Again, you've got to do all the same things those other guys did. With they spray a whole house in maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe an hour. I've seen them where they go really fast. They know what they're doing. But you're going to have to spend all the time that they did, and probably with less manpower, to protect everything. And that includes protecting it with air pressure blowing against whatever plastic or things you did to cover it up. It's going to want to uncover things. So you are now with furniture trying to do these things. That's quite another journey. You're protecting all that valuable stuff. Um, so the heavier the orange peel, the more of a chance that you could see a difference if you flatten it down, knock it down with usually like a 14-inch knife. But those guys that do the knockdown, they have paint shields, which are 3 foot wide. And just real light plastic, and just take it and wipe down a whole section. And then you got to clean it off both sides, wipe down both sections. Now, do you have to have a hopper and a compressor and hose and all that experience to do textures? No, you do not. You can do hand textures with hand brushes. And you can do textures with sponges. So let's talk a little bit more about those things. So I told you with the paint shield and the knives that generally a person has like a 12-inch or 14-inch knife. Then when you wipe it down, you wipe both sides of that knife or that paint shield. You scrape both sides of it so that you don't drag into that texture, and it'll show all kinds of places where it's dragging instead of being smooth. And that's a wrong thing, because then you have to, if you do that, then you have to spray it again because it'll look bad or noticeable. Even a model knows her flaws. So when it comes to choices, you can use the air compressor. Well, you've got the big machine, which most people are not going to own. You got a smaller machine that mimics it, and then you've got your regular compressors with a hopper. And then you got real cheap hoppers at Harbor Freight for like 40, 50 bucks, little small ones. They have to fill a whole lot more, and they have a lot harder time doing the same quality and covering the same area because the reservoir is smaller. So that is a choice. Or you can do hand textures, which I spent a lot of time in Florida doing hand textures because that was what the custom houses wanted. So what you would do is they have a brush that is bigger than my hand, probably a little longer, about that wide. It's a piece of wood in the center with place for a screw-in handle, and it'll have one brush to do that, or you can get one that has that two brushes in it and a bar, 2 bars across, and you put in the middle of it, and you can cover more area. But what we did was had one guy just mixing mud, and then he would dump it into the wheelbarrow, and 2 or 3 guys were taking their brushes and taking it plop plop, boom boom boom. You get used to, if you put the more times you hit a certain area with mud, the smaller the texture gets. And you let it hang down, you're like, oh man, it looks terrible. It looks like stalactites in a cave or something. But you leave it to the consistent texture that you are going to be used to. And then there's another guy that will come along and he will knock it down. Usually give it some time. You don't get on it right away. So like everybody's sweating, working hard. That one guy's mixing as fast as he can, buckets of mud, and then dumping it in there, and you're using it up as fast as he can mix it. So now you're talking about 3, maybe 4 guys, maybe even 5 guys doing that texture on a big house, and it is a lot of work to do that. It's a lot of physical work. You don't have to do it all at one time because it really doesn't tell on you if you take your time to do the same amount of times up on it. Because if you go over it and over it, it gets smaller and smaller. So you get used to using that texture brush or brushes. And you want to try random. So you're turning the brushes, kind of like pop, pop, turn, turn, pop, 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 pop. You don't want to be consistent. If you're consistent, your pattern will show. So when you do all that, let it set for a little bit. A lot of times they're 10-foot ceilings, 9-foot ceilings. You can't just up and reach it. So you got to end up getting a scaffold. And another guy pushes while this other guy's taking his knife. And every time you wipe it off into your pan. Wipe it real lightly. And the trick is not to put your fingers on the back side of that knife handle. Because if you do, you're pushing harder. You're just doing real lightly. You're pushing it, pulling it back both sides of your knife, and just keep on doing it. Pull from different directions. Always clean your knife. If you don't, you'll end up dragging stuff and it'll show. You'll end up having to do it again. And you can do it again. It's pretty forgiving. The thing I like about hand textures is that if you once you get used to it, you can do your own over and over again. And hand textures can be done on paneling, plywood, same with any kind of other texture like popcorn. I've done it on OSB and finished it out like drywall, and then sprayed texture on. Nobody, after it's painted, nobody could tell the difference. It's just not going to be it because it was done thoroughly and done a good job as if it was drywall.
And OSB keeps your renters from kicking holes in the wall.
Yeah, I had gotten tired of renters getting mad and punching a wall or kicking a wall because they're mad, or some little kid just ramming his tricycle into the wall until it caved in the 3/8 drywall that's in a mobile home. So I just started replacing things with OSB, and at that time it was cheaper. Now it's not. Drywall's cheaper, but it's still stronger, and you just have to have a little bit of skill in finishing the OSB as if there is no recess, if you know what drywall finishing is. There's so anyway, you can spray texture on all those things, and you can do hand texture on all those things. And with as slow as you're going and with no air pressure, it's a lot more forgiving. You don't have to cover up as much of an area, but be mindful that your feet are tracking up a lot of stuff. So you need to leave yourself a way out the door without, and then don't forget about the deck or the sidewalk or the porch, that you get your feet with that white drywall mud tracking everywhere. So you might keep that in mind also. So a hand texture, generally you do heavier on the ceiling with that type of brush pull down, not heavy. We used to call it Spanish lace. So you can do that heavy knockdown and then pull it down. And then on your walls, you just took the same brushes, but you didn't have to put a handle on it. You could do, if it was within your reach, from my case, I could reach 8 foot easy. And if I needed a ladder, I could go up to 9 or 10 and get up high. So you would hit that brush on there more often, and it would be smaller areas, smaller texture. It's more fine. It ends up looking like a real lace look. Okay, so you have heavy on the ceiling, lighter on the walls. That's with that one type of brush. And you can buy those brushes to this day at Home Depot and Lowe's, particularly Lowe's. And you can do it yourself. You can patch that quite easily.
I've helped you do it.
Yeah, Christina's.
I can help.
Right. The nursing skills didn't kind of bleed over into that, but she did well. So that hand texture is, I've been calling it a lace look. But then when it comes to ceilings, there's other, and you can do the same thing on walls, but most of the time it's on the ceiling. It's a little more work, but what you do is what they call a crow's foot. And what they're doing then is they're putting making a jig so that you would have 3 feet, like maybe 3 broom handles, and then screw it together, and then you can. So what you got to do is skim that mud, less than a 1/4 inch. Just skim it, put it on there, try to keep it on as smooth as you can. Then you take your handle and you put this crow's foot on in a pattern, like a line all the way across and then back and line all the way across. Ends up being something interesting to look at. You can use the same kind of skimming and then coming back and skimming it all, getting that less than a 1/4 inch of mud on it, to do a sunburst. Now, sunburst is a little different. Now, what you're doing with that is the brush that I was telling you about that we used for the lacy texture. You use that, something similar to that, and you just turn it a half turn. So you go into the next where it's not at, and you do it.
Watching.
So you just keep turning it. Now you can do that with a sponge also. There's quite a bit of sponge textures. Again, you put a skim on it, and then you take your sponge and you just dap it. And I don't know if you guys have seen that, but there's a lot of sponge textures out there that I've had to fix.
Ty's watching.
Cool. Glad to have him. So that texture is, again, pretty easy to do. And the thing about these textures, unlike popcorn, they don't fall off when you paint. There is some of it that gets into your roller, because some of it's loose, and it gets into your roller, and you end up having to clean your roller. That requires, you're going to have to paint it more than one time. Generally, you're going to paint, anytime you paint, you're going to end up doing at least 2 coats. So you're looking at a primer and then a paint. And usually ceiling paint is flat. But I have worked for people many times that wanted the walls the same color as the ceiling. So if it was, in one case, it was kind of almost burnt orange. It was burnt orange on the ceiling and the walls. So you can do that. But you need to be conscious of the fact that you can pick up that mud from the texture, and it can get stuck into your roller, and you'll use a lot of paint. So use your primer first, then do your paint on texture, and expect to use a lot of paint because it drinks a lot. Whenever you're mixing the mud for texture, it's quite a bit of water, and it will require a very strong drill to spin mud. And you would know that if you did any drywall finishing. If you don't use a strong drill, you will burn up your battery powered drill, most likely. It will start smoking. And most of your electric drills are the same way. It requires a very strong motor. I have 2 of them that I've had a whole hog Milwaukee get, had a hard time, burned one up. It's quite expensive. I didn't know it was going on. I didn't do it. It was one of the guys working with me. He's like, "Hey man, it quit working." I was like, I come out there and it was still smoking. I was like, "Okay, whenever the drill starts smoking, there's a new rule. Stop." So it burnt up the armature, and you can spend money buying the parts, but I can buy the drill cheaper. So you want to make sure you have a big, heavy drill. I have 2 of them, and I buy them every time I see them, that are from the 50s. Remember those big old chrome looking aluminum big drills? They're like, the body on the motor is like that big. Got a handle. You better have a side handle also, because the bucket itself will try to throw you, and then the bucket will start spinning if you don't have it held with your feet. So when you're putting moisture into these textures, you're going to put at least 1 pan, or say 1.5 quarts of water, and you're going to take your spinner and paddle and push it in so that water will soak down in there, and you're going to spin it a little bit and then work it with your drill on it. Just keep working and spinning it. there's a band that runs across just the lid where it snaps on. When you peel that off, there's a band that runs around. It's probably about an inch and a half thick. That is to keep the thing from wobbling all over the place. Because there, for about 6 months, the drywall company's like, hey, we're going to try to do this without putting that plastic band and save some money. Well, if you didn't, it would just wobble all over. We end up having to make a holder for the buckets of mud to keep it from doing that. So there's a reason why those things have that plastic band all the way around where the handle goes into. Um, so you're going to expect a lot of moving up and down, getting that mud softened up, adding water to it, and guess what? That mud, a drywall mud, drywall compound, will drink water. So you may have had it mixed right to begin with. What we always said was let it drink for a little bit, come back in minute or two, and spin it again, add some more water, spin it again, add some more water. And at the bottom, quite often, you didn't spin it as much as you thought, so you're going to end up, hold on, we're getting too thick for the application that we're doing. We're going to have to add some more water, spin it some more, or take it over there and mix it in with some other stuff that we have. So when you're doing orange peel, it has to be pretty liquid, not literal liquid, but you're going to have to take it and pour it into the hopper. The hopper is going to be sitting down low, usually on the handle, on the ground, and they're going to pour it in. And then you're going to pick it up, which is going to weigh 30 pounds of mud inside that hopper, and you're going to be spraying. It's going to be a workout. And my boys, when they were little, used to ask me, Dad, how did you get so big? And I always said the same thing. It's pain. That's how I got big. So I started off 170 pounds when I graduated high school, and I weigh 270 now. I have some fat, but it's not all fat, believe me. So expect the pain and expect the sweat. Expect it to be you breathing hard and want to take a rest. And you really don't want to have that mud sitting in that hopper for a terrible long time. You're going to end up wanting to spray it all out. And then when you clean it, you're going to have to run water through it until it quits blowing out white. And that doesn't matter what texture you use the hopper with, you're going to want to clean it with water. And then clean it and clean it and clean it and clean it some more. Get up inside the upper part of it, clean it all up. Or if you don't, you're going to end up with a smaller and smaller hopper. And more importantly, when you get ready to go back to it, it won't work. You'll have to take it all apart, and you'll have to learn how it goes back together, how to take it apart, how to get it back together, and oil all those places up with WD-40 before you end up. So it's quite a journey. Before you end up putting that thing up, you're going to have to hose it out with the air pressure on it, spraying it into the grass or something, into a box. Just spray and spray and spray until it blows out clean. And then you got to take and clean it up even more. And I would spray some WD-40 or not. WD-40 is corrosive, so you might consider using other oils than WD-40. That is usually for a rusty thing where you want to loosen up bolts and things like that. So, but anyway, you want to spray some kind of oil in there so it'll stay and not rust, and then that handle not work properly. And eventually you'll have to get used to replacing the rubber gaskets if you do very much spraying texture. You'll have to replace gaskets and take it apart, and you'll get familiar with it and then put it back together, and then hopefully things work for you. So we've talked about popcorn, Spanish lace or heavy knockdown, orange peel with knockdown. We've talked about crow's foot. I haven't done any because I haven't had anybody ask me for it. Sunburst, which is where you take the brush and you just turn it in half shape like the sun rising. And sponge texture. So you're taking a wet sponge and you're just kind of doing usually random, but I see it over and over where people don't do random, but it is a sponge texture. And there's a mobile home that I worked on. They did a great job. It's a sponge texture in it. They did a good job. You can't see any of the seams. They did a really good job on it. So those are the things that you can do with what I'm telling you. And all those things require you cleaning all your tools. And if you're using finishing knives, generally I use stainless. Most of your finishers don't want to use stainless because it's harder on your hands and your carpal tunnel problems. If that's what you do for a living, you have to be conscious of the fact you don't want something you have to push real hard, because then you end up with your fingers having problems and your wrists with the carpal tunnel. So they just go to non-stainless metal. And so when they get through, they clean everything up. If they're conscientious, they clean their pan, their knives, and then they spray it with oil so it doesn't rust when they get back to it the next day or two, maybe even over the weekend. It'll be rusty within a day. So you would spray oil on it if it's not stainless. Everything I use is stainless, but I change all my tools. I don't use the same handles, so the shape of my hand is different every time. So I mean, I have different brands of tools that have different shape handles. Everybody has their own idea of how to manufacture it. It's none of them the same. And I've never had any trigger fingers or permanently curled hands or carpal tunnel problems where you have pain in the middle of your hand and problems, a lot of pain in your wrist. Then you have to get to surgeries and you have still with the pain and the suffering from it. So I just use different handles, and if I use the same ones on a bigger job, I change the position of my hands and how I do it. And I've just done it that way. So you need to be conscious of the fact that everything you do requires maintenance. So if you use your hopper, your compressor, all that stuff's got to be getting texture on it. You got to clean all that off. That compressor should have some baby oil in it. The hoses have to be cleaned. The connections have to be cleaned and oiled. Your hopper, your finishing knives, everything has to be cleaned. And then you got also the plastic you got to throw away. Everything requires maintenance. Now, next time you get ready to do texture, you got to go get more plastic or peel out some more. You got to get more tape as time passes. If you do it all the time, you're going to get a taping machine and paper. You're going to pay for it, but it speeds up your time because your time is money. So these are the things that I'm telling you, not because I'm trying to be know-it-all, but because I'm trying to share with you what you got to get ready to do. And if you go to the videos, I believe you'll see most of everything. I haven't done a sponge video, and I haven't done a crow's foot, or I don't think I've done sunburst either. But I can show you those things. But I have shown.
With the thing. Yeah, you did that in Kim's.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, all those things are things that you can do, and there's plenty of videos out there that shows you how to do them. So what I suggest is you go to those videos, not just hear me, see what I'm saying, and then you can decide what you think you can do. And I think you can always do more than what you actually are afraid you can't. So most of the time it's learning to overcome what the fears in your head. There was a guy that I work with all the time. One of his favorite phrases was, fear is a mind number. So your mind is usually very, very capable, but that fear is telling you you can't do it. But I'm telling you, you might make mistakes like you do with anything you've never done before, but you can do it. Side, piece of plywood that you don't care anything about, and like, hey, yeah, I kind of get the idea. Oh, I pull the trigger this way, or I wipe it down this way. Yeah, okay, I get it. And even when I'm showing other people, if they haven't seen that texture, quite often I'll spray it on a piece of drywall 3x3, or I'll put texture on that drywall with hand texture, And so and I take it to them, this is what it's going to look like. So they're not totally shocked when I'm doing it with, you know, on their property. Like, oh my God, it looks horrible. Or they don't say it that way, like, oh, do you know what you're doing? Yeah. So these are things that you have to get used to when you're doing it for yourself. So I encourage you to expand and grow, be more than what you are, and that way you can have great satisfaction of doing things with your hands. I'm not even talking about how much money you're saving. I'm talking about the confidence and the pleasure of seeing the work of your hands come to fruition. And I would encourage everybody to get that uh, ownership of the work that they do and live with it and say, you know what, I may not be perfect, but I did that. So I'm sharing this with you so that you can use that cheerleader confidence that I'm passing on to you, and don't feel bad if you forgot to do something, or if you just didn't do it right. You can scrape it off and then go back at it again. And while it's wet, it'd be a lot easier. So if you don't like it, scrape it off and say, okay, we'll get set up to do it again. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to come back next Saturday and we'll be open to your questions. And I hope that all of you guys, if you have any questions, you have the courage to ask, and I'll be happy to share with you the 40 plus years, getting close to 45, 50 years of construction work when they were paying me to do the work that I'm sharing with you. And I'd be happy to share those things with you. And matter of fact, it's leaving my imprint on other people to make their lives better. That's what I'm hoping to do. And when it comes to Ty, who's watching, it's for his benefit. Whenever he gets ready to do his home, he can do things. He doesn't have to call on somebody else if I'm not around. My boys can go buy a house and they can watch a video and know that what I'm telling them is the truth, because they saw me do it, worked with me, and know that it can be done if I say it can be. So I wish to pass that confidence on to all of you guys, and I hope to be comforting all along with it. So until next Saturday, thank you for watching me, for whoever few that are out there. And again, if you have any questions, bring them up next Saturday and we'll try to get to them. See you guys.